the fullest extent that we possibly can. And in that way, we can all understand that through good times and bad, we share the risks and the opportunities. Thank you.
Seeley.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you very much indeed to my honourable friend Havant for securing the debate and for being part of the APPG. His presence there is very welcome, and I thought he spoke very eloquently about the needs of Hayling Island, where I've been once upon a time when I was very young, and I remember how lovely it was. And I also thank a friend from, Orkney and Shetland for his contribution, and it is always good to hear of the experiences of other islands. This is not, as we know, a debate about places like the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man, which are Crown dependencies. This is about islands which are fully within the governance of the United Kingdom, but clearly have physical characteristics which make them islands and give them distinct characteristics. And indeed, our islands are unique and special places, and it is to represent my island is a passion and a privilege, and one that I'm incredibly grateful for. And I love being here, but I wouldn't want to represent anywhere else apart from the Isle of Wight. Islands are, by their definition, at the fringes of our nation, but they help to define us, and they have a special place, I think, in our geography and culture. However, my argument to the Minister, and I'm very grateful for his presence, is that they don't always get their fair share because they are overlooked. And I believe in my island's case, my constituency, the Isle of Wight, that is especially true. And by way of example, the Scottish Islands get the Scottish Islands Needs Allowance, SENA, that comes from the Scottish Government. So they get the Barnett Formula, which is generous, and on top of that, they get the Scottish Islands Needs Allowance. And if I remember correctly and got my facts right, I'm sure my friend will correct me if I'm wrong, the Western Islands, Orkney and Shetland get an extra £6 million a year through the SENA in order to understand, in order to accept the fact that supplying government services on islands tends to cost more than it would be on the mainland. The Isle of Wight gets none of that, despite the fact that we have a population several times, 4 times bigger than the Western Islands, for example, and 2 or 3 or 4 times bigger than Orkney and Shetland and other islands. So I do feel that we don't get our fair share, and when it comes to fair funding, we are unfairly funded. And the central reason for that is a simple one. It's the Solent. Government funding systems are not designed to deal with isolation by water. So in the Rural Isolation Grant, in the Rural Farming Grants, all these things are predicated on a sense of isolation, but isolation on land and not isolation by water. And one of the arguments that I'm trying to make, and I've made to the Minister's colleagues, Mr. Chairman, in different other government departments, is that if you're going to have a fair funding formula, you need to take into account isolation by water. Now, I've sort of got straight into the meat of my speech. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. We are very much open for business on the Isle of Wight. And we are looking and are trying to attract new businesses to the island. And our regeneration team and our council has a very ambitious programme, which I absolutely share and will be working hand in glove with them. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, we have a unique scientific heritage. Marconi set up the first experimental wireless station off the south coast of the island on St Catherine's Down, one of the sunniest places in Britain. Seaplanes were built by Saunders and Rowe in East Cowes. We have major employers, and we have a cluster of defence, composite and high-tech industries. So Gurit, BAE, GKN, now Melrose and Vestas. And in fact, a high percentage of the world's large offshore turbine blades are made on the Isle of Wight at the Vestas factory, and they're doing great stuff on the island, and I thank them, and as I do all employers, for their presence. So we are very much home to high-tech business and business at the cutting edge of their industries. However, as I've alluded to, there is a problem with providing government services. A University of Portsmouth study, 2015 study, said that the extra cost of providing government services on the Isle of Wight was £6.4 million a year because of the cost of being an island. Now, they broke that down into 3. For self-sufficiency, so the lack of spillover of public goods provision. what they call an island premium, so the additional cost of conducting business on and with islands, as my honourable friend from Shetland and from Orkney and Shetland will know. And third, the sense of dislocation, the physical and perceived separation from the mainland, which could be in terms of providing services to a smaller population and a smaller market. And I'll give you examples. So our care homes, for example, and I think this is clearly a mistake that we're rectifying, elderly folks were put into care homes earlier than on the mainland, and yet our care homes were costing more than the mainland because of the lack of competition between them. And in fact, in some extent as well, they're high quality. So this was pushing additional burden on our adult social care costs, which skewed our funding so that we couldn't spend the money on helping with infrastructure to provide jobs and to provide a jobs agenda, which is absolutely vital to the island, to keep our youngsters on the island and to make us the vibrant and successful community that we are, but we're building on as well. So in those three different ways, for self-sufficiency, the island premium and dislocation, there is an extra cost of government services on the Isle of Wight. And that's been estimated in an academically rigid, peer-reviewed article at £6.4 million a year. That does not include other factors, Mr. Chairman, that I would also like to bring to the attention of the Minister. One of those is the Green Book estimate. Green Book estimates, that's the terms and the references of government investment. It doesn't work for the island because we can't claim, because we are physically isolated, we can't claim that that works for Southampton, or that it works for Portsmouth, or it works indeed for Havant, because we are physically separated. So just providing infrastructure, the Green Book estimates process counts against the Isle of Wight. I've mentioned separation by water with the Rural Isolation Grant, and for farming grants as well, because we are in the wealthy southeast, we are prejudiced against. And in fact, in many ways, Mr. Chairman, being part of the wealthy southeast, we get all the downside of being the southeast because we don't, get that extra support because we're seen to be in the wealthiest area of the country, and yet, in many ways, our economy is similar to that of West Devon or indeed Cornwall. It's a lot of visitor, some tourism, some culture, little clusters of high tech and farming. And whereas lovely places like Cornwall get money thrown at them through EU grants and government support, we have had very little of that. And yet the amounts of money, Mr. Chairman, that we would ask from central government to make the island a success, or even more of a success, are really very small. And I would love to sit down and have that conversation with the Minister in greater detail. The answer to this is not devolution, because the housing system, sadly, doesn't work for us as well, and we will be arguing why we are an exception to that. But it's a modest, tailored packaging of support that recognises that we're an island, that recognises that £6 million extra in fair funding for the council would be a benefit, that recognises that actually because we're an island and we need an A&E, we need a maternity, because you can't give birth on a helicopter in going to the mainland, and the ambulance can't wait for 4 hours to get the ferry overnight, that our funding in health services is skewed. And indeed our funding in many things is skewed by the fact that we're an island, and that's not recognised. However, as I say, we have many little clusters of excellence. Our tourism economy is significantly improving. We're going to have one of the best broadbands in the world very soon, because thanks to our wonderful local white fibre and to the Department of Culture, thank you very much indeed, we're getting significant sums of money so that we will get ultra super fast broadband for 5 out of 6 houses on the island. So in fact, if you've got a broadband business, the place you want to be is not London, not Old Street, not Moorgate, not Brighton, but Cowes or Newport, because you will have broadband speeds comparable with Singapore. Now, what I need to do, working with colleagues in the council, is work out how we get the other 1/6 of houses in the more rural, the very rural areas, linked up to that as well. So you can have Singapore speeds of broadband, in your little farmhouse in Newtown Creek or in Bryston or in Shale or wherever. Most importantly, education is critical to our future. It is improving. Our education is becoming a success story. We need probably to work on restructuring our sixth forms, but most importantly, I would like to have a conversation with the Treasury and with the relevant ministers about getting significantly more higher education to the Isle of Wight, and specifically a university campus. I would like it in Newport as part of our critical Newport Harbour redevelopment. it may be that it would go elsewhere. But higher education is the way we get much higher levels of, clearly, higher education on the island, but also that will drive our software businesses that our friend already spoke, that our friend here already spoke of, and other key investments. We've also won special status from the Arts Council, and we're building a much stronger cultural offer, both for tourism, education, aspiration, and critically, Mr. Chairman, for regeneration as well, which is important for the Minister to be aware of. Our farming and small businesses. Again, I would love to have a conversation. I'm having a conversation with the Minister responsible for farming about mobile slaughtermen. So once we leave the European Union, we are too small to have an abattoir. Yet our field structure on the island is perfectly suited to animal husbandry, and we are very keen to support local food production, which is good for multiple reasons, not only over and above employment. But, please.
I understand exactly what the honourable member says when he says they're too small to have an abattoir, because we have the same issue in the Northern Isles. I would suggest to him, though, that's not actually the case. The Isle of Wight is surely only too small to have an abattoir in the way that we regulate and manage abattoirs at the moment. A more sensitive system of regulation would surely allow a good business there.
And I'm very happy for that correction. I think what we need to do is to, post-Brexit, on farming, change the rules, so either we have a smaller abattoirs or we have mobile slaughtermen who can kill animals in a humane way on the farm and in a way that allows them to go into the human food chain, which does not exist at the moment. Finally, I would like to have a conversation with the relevant minister in due course about BAE and the need to have a complex radar technology demonstrator in Cowes. If we wish to keep radar technology for the next 50 years in this country, and I believe there is a critical national interest in doing so, the place to have it, the only realistic place to have it in the United Kingdom, is where the radar for all the aircraft carriers for the Type 45 and all the Royal Navy warships are made. And that is in West Cowes at the BAE plant there. And I want to bring together BAE and government to have that conversation. Small sums of money, we're talking about 5, 10 or 15 million pounds, to secure a complex radar technology demonstrator so that we can keep those high-tech jobs and that high-tech knowledge on the island. I'll wind up now, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. I apologise, I've taken a touch too long. The island is a success story. But I don't believe that the government has engaged with us enough over the past 10 to 20 years to really maximise our success, both in terms of building a new economy, building a really advanced education system, and doing all the things that we need to do regarding our infrastructure, our broadband, and all the high-tech jobs so that we can make the island the economic success story that it is. And I would reinforce the point about the Coastal Communities Fund and the importance of spending a little bit of time and effort by the Treasury in understanding islands, their unique circumstances, and the very small amounts of money in the great scheme of things that could help drive enterprise and drive economic progress. More than anything, I want my constituency, I want the wonderful Isle of Wight to be contributing economically, rather than be a place where we get handouts from central government because we say we're poor, we don't have this, we don't have that. With a bit of help from from government, I do apologise, Mr. Chairman, from a bit of help from the Treasury and from government and greater integration and greater support, I believe that you could help drive our success story further. Thank you.
Bill Grant.